Hey folks, Lenny Lawson here, the car guru in the Gateway Ford studio. Well, it's really not a studio. It's just my office with a really high quality microphone. And I have a preamp hooked to my iMac computer, or my Mac computer. So that's the Gateway Ford studio in a nutshell. I've been going through the news this morning, the auto news. Aren't you excited? Well, you should be concerned a little bit because this tariff thing is very complicated and it's going to make cars more expensive. If it doesn't last very long, like if this is kind of a threat, a short-term threat, I mean, they did take effect. So it's more than a threat. It's actually, he did it. And then Mexico and Canada have retaliated. So let's say that you have let's say you have a transmission assembly that's manufactured in Texas, and it goes into a finished product that comes out of Mexico. So they take that transmission, they put it on a truck, it goes to a plant in Mexico where they build, say, Fords, okay? So it's got a tariff on it, that transmission value. Let's say it's $5,000. Then there's a 25% tariff on it that Mexico is charging. And then when they put it into the car as it's manufactured or as it's being manufactured, and that completed car crosses the border back into the United States, it's taxed at 25% again. So that's a 25% tariff on the finished product, which includes the transmission that was already taxed at 25% by Mexico. So that's a 50% more expensive transmission. Do you see why this is complicated? And it's so much more than transmissions. There's a lot of components. There are components that are made in Greenville, Tennessee that are shipped to Mexico. They will face a tariff, and then they will be installed in a vehicle, and it will be tariffed again when it comes into the United States. Do you like that? You know, I just feel like there could be a better strategy, but who am I? I'm just a little old car dealer in Greenville, Tennessee. But I think that the factories or the automakers could be incentivized in a more effective way to move their plants to the United States than to slap 25% tariffs on them. And I'm in favor of most of the things that are being done right now. Some of you may not like that, but you know, I am a businessman and I have to be careful what I say. So I've talked to several of my listeners say, why don't you talk more about politics? Because this is not a political show. It's a practical show about cars and car ownership, your car life. It's a big deal. And this is a big deal. This is something that will affect a lot of car buyers and car manufacturers and car dealers, because what they're saying is that the car makers could really cut back on production and just kind of wait this thing out for about 6 months and really just not supply cars. It would get back to what it was during the pandemic, where car dealers don't have many cars and the prices go up. So not only are they going up because of the lack of supply, they would be going up because of the tariffs as well. But if they can solve this in the next 3 to 6 months, well, really 6 months is pushing it. Sometime in the next 0 to 3 months, then the impacts could be minimal. You know, the cars, well, let's see, what brands? Let's see, Toyota RAV4, biggest selling utility vehicle in the United States. I think it actually outsold the F-150 last year. Full-size pickups from Chevrolet, so the Silverado, GMC, Sierra, and Ram. The Ford Mustang Mach-E, that's not a big deal. Bronco Sport, that is a big deal. And Maverick, bigger deal. The Chevrolet Equinox, big deal for General Motors and the Blazer. The GMC Terrain, the Lexus RX, the Honda HR-V, the Civic, the Honda CR-V, the Hyundai, I know how to say it, it's Hyundai, Tucson, and the Audi. Do you say Audi? A lot of people say Audi. I know a guy that says Audi. Anyway, the Audi Q5 and the Volkswagen Jetta Taos, I think that's how you say it, Taos, like Taos, Teos, Mexico, and the Tiguan. All of those are going to be taxed at 25%. I'm calling it tax, but you know what it is. It's the tariff. I like tax better because it's one syllable. So there are upstream and downstream effects of this. What a lot of the manufacturers are concerned about are the fate of suppliers. These are the people that build that transmission and send it south, or they build wiring harnesses or door handles or just different components, because the manufacturers are going to say, oh, we're putting the brakes on everything. So they're just not going to import anything for a while. What does that do for the supplier, the little supplier in Greenville, Tennessee? Well, they have to lay off people because they have to shut down their assembly because they can't get paid. They can build product, but they're not going to get paid for it. And if they ship it, it's going to cost a 25% duty to ship it across the line. So that's serious. So here's what the automakers are saying. They say tariffs lasting between 6 and 8 weeks would cause production of several high-exposure vehicles, such as the Silverado and the RAV4 and so forth, to be slowed or halted, and lead automakers to conserve inventory and be conservative on replenishing with tariffed stock. So there's going to be some stock out there sitting on dealers' lots that are non-tariffed. They're 25% less expensive. And so they're just going to be really slow to bring these vehicles across that will have a 25% tax slapped on top of them. Now, what do you do if all of a sudden the tariffs go away? Will the tariffs that were in place before they, canceled it, will they be refunded, to the automakers? Who knows? Doesn't say. If tariffs are integrated into the supply chain long term, then automakers would probably have to change the regions where products are sourced in order to dodge them. Honda already plans to move the next generation Civic production from Mexico to Indiana, but they can't do that with a snap of the fingers. That's 2028. That's 3 years from now before that can even happen. And then they're estimating that North American light vehicle sales would decline by 10% for several years and make America less competitive if tariffs are sustained. Sales would fall by 8% in Mexico and 10% in the U.S. and 15% in Canada. This ain't good for anybody. Now, if it helps get concessions on very important things and it's a short-lived scenario, then it was a good move. Long term, there's nothing good about it, and I hate to say that. All right, I'm going to take my first break. I'll be back here in just a minute. One more tariff that's kind of alarming is the 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. Now, that begins on March 12th. Now, the tariffs will have no exceptions. So that would stack on top of the Canada and Mexico duties, meaning that steel or aluminum imported from those countries will be taxed at 50%. I may get some hate mail for complaining about this, but this is business. That's all it is. Just looking at the numbers, thinking about the ramifications of this on my scale, in a small town in East Tennessee. But it does affect every town and every person, and it's just something that it's a strategy. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this that maybe Lenny Lawson is totally not aware of, and I'm willing to grant the benefit of the doubt to our president and his administration. We'll just have to see what happens. Okay, so as I said, I am sitting in my office, the Gateway Studio, and across from me, I'm at my desk, and on the other side are two wingback chairs, and those were my dad's wingback chairs that were in his office, so that brings me comfort. In those chairs, on one chair is my coat, and the other chair is an EV charger. Yes, it's a box. It's probably 24 inches long and 18 inches wide and 12 inches tall, and it will soon be installed on a pedestal out on the lot in front of the Nissan showroom. So why is it there? Well, we have to upgrade our power supply to our EV chargers because the ones that we initially installed probably 4 years ago have become obsolete. We need more juice going outside into our EV chargers. I am not installing level 3 chargers because that's about $100,000 per charger exercise. And then you have to put in all the infrastructure first, which is probably another 100,000. And so I decided not to do that because I just really didn't feel like East Tennessee was going to be the capital of EVs and that people would be buying them left and right. I never believed that because I really understood, early I understood the number one challenge to EV adoption, well, maybe number 2 challenge, was the availability of chargers. I used to think that that was the number one challenge. And then I drove an EV for a while, and I realized that I wasn't really going to travel that much in it. I mean, if it was my only car, then it would be an issue. But, the availability of charging infrastructure out there really doesn't matter to somebody that never travels in their EV. Would you agree with that? And then the other obstacle for me was range. Now, probably a couple times a month, I'll go to Knoxville and back. Maybe down to Lenoir City where my wife's mother lives. And most of my trips from Greenville are going to really be Morristown, Johnson City. I rarely go to Kingsport, rarely go to Bristol. I could get to Asheville and back easily on an EV charge for a typical vehicle. I know the Mach 3, not the Mach 3, I mean the Mach E, which has a range of about, 250 to 320 miles. So if that was all I was doing, and I really fell in love, and I do love the way EVs drive. They're so smooth, they're so quiet, they're very powerful. I might consider one, but I would never buy one and own it. I would lease it. Of course, I don't mind leasing because I don't mind recommending leasing to people on gasoline-powered vehicles, especially if they like to trade every 2 or 3 years. It makes a lot of sense if there's some good incentives on those particular vehicles on leases. If they're not, then you're probably better off buying it if you have a little bit of equity in your trade. You're not really upside down. Leases aren't for those folks. But when it comes to EVs, the technology is going to change so much, and who wants to own one of those things, in 3 or 4 years when they have depreciated 50% worse or 50% more than the gasoline-powered alternative? Now, as I've said before, if you go to, Hyundai dealership, who else sells EVs? Go to a Tesla store, go down to Knoxville, drive it. You will be very impressed. Come to Gateway, drive a Mach-E or a Lightning. You will walk away very impressed. But 98% of you will say, I like it, but I'm not buying it. And I'm not leasing it either. A lot of that is political, don't you think? And I think Elon Musk has shot himself in the foot because of the stances that he has taken in recent elections. And with the Doge experience, I think he has alienated a lot of the tree huggers that used to buy his Tesla vehicles. Did I say tree huggers out loud? Okay, maybe I should erase that. The more liberal-minded folks. Yeah, a lot of those folks are abandoning Elon and Tesla. But my point is, if you drove one, you'd be very impressed. But don't buy it. And another thing, don't come to Gateway for free electricity. We actually had a lady that showed up out at right beside our EV charger in front of the Nissan showroom. She would show up at about 3 in the afternoon. She was driving a Nissan Leaf. She'd pull right on in, unhook the charger, plug it into her Nissan Leaf, and just sit there. Back window was busted out of her Nissan Leaf. And I just walked by there one day and said, well, that's weird, and didn't think anything else about it. The next day, I go out there about 3 o'clock. She's pulling in again, plugging in again to our charger. So I went up to the window and I said, ma'am, could I ask you what you're doing? She said, I'm charging my My Leaf? I said, well, I can see that, but this is not a public charger. She said, well, I came in, plugged it in, and there was no place to put in a credit card or anything, so I just figured it was free. Well, ma'am, I can assure you the electricity is not free to me, and I would appreciate it. You can go ahead and sit here, for the rest of the afternoon or whatever, but please, let's not do that, okay? Charge at home. That's where you're supposed to charge. Well, I don't have a charger at home. Well, you can buy them on Amazon, okay? We'll see you later. So anyway, I didn't have an EV charger at home. I just used a 110 outlet, the Nissan Aria that I drove it for probably 6 months, and I enjoyed it. Took a couple short trips, went to Abingdon, and that was a little concerning because it was really cold. Like when we left Greenville, it was like 20 degrees. And EVs they can lose as much as 40% of their range if it's really cold. And it was. So I was a little bit nervous. I drove around Bristol looking for an EV charger. I found several. Nissan provides you with a map where you can find chargers, but they were all level 2 chargers. And so I would have had to sit there for 8 hours to get a full charge. And for the 20 minutes that I was willing to sit there, I didn't get much. I might have gotten 4 or 5 miles. But I had enough to get back home. So when we had the Aria at the house, I pulled it in her parking spot in the garage, and I just plug into a 110 outlet. And it would take 3 days to charge it on a 110, but we could live without it because we had other cars around. So it just goes to show you that if you're going to be an EV owner or leaseor, then you need other cars because you don't want to go on a long trip in an EV. It's too risky unless you're driving a Tesla or your particular company, like Ford or General Motors, has made arrangements with Tesla to be able to use their supercharger network because they are reliable, but they're not free. I mean, I filled up one of our EVs over at the level 3 chargers at a restaurant that's less than 500 yards away from me. It cost $30 to fill it up. Now, what would it have cost if it had been a gasoline vehicle of approximately the same size? Probably $60. So you're saving money driving an EV. Are you saving enough to justify it, to be able to live with the fear of not finding an EV charger? I don't think so. Not for me. But like I say, for local use, going to Knoxville and different places, they're wonderful. Okay, I'll take my last break. I'll be back in just a minute. Way back in 1964 and a half, did you know there was a 1964 and a half? Well, the only time that you hear that is when somebody's talking about the Ford Mustang. But my dad entered a contest and won a trip for a family of 4 to go to the New York World's Fair. And I'll never forget that trip. We flew Eastern Airlines turboprop to Newark Airport, and my dad got a taxi and went downtown New York City, stayed at the Warwick Hotel. I was, 8 years old. My brother was 10. And my dad had promised that he would take us to the FAO Schwartz toy store there I think it's on 5th Avenue. So we were pumped about that. Wasn't real pumped about the World's Fair because I didn't know what it was. But when we ended up going to the World's Fair, we rode a subway out to wherever, I can't remember the name of the place, Flushing Meadow or someplace out there. And I think it's where they have the U.S. Open now. But there was that big globe, and I just thought that thing was just so amazing. But it was at the 1964 World's Fair that Ford Motor Company had a big pavilion, and they introduced the 1964 and a half Mustang. Now, there is no such thing as a 1964 and a half because the VIN number says it's a 1965 model. But if it was built before a certain date, that's what all the collectors call it. So not too long after that, Lee Iacocca, who was kind of one of the fathers of the Mustang, decided to give a guy named Carroll Shelby a call. And they got together, and they decided to send a bunch of white fastback Mustangs to Carroll Shelby's studio. It really was a shop at the Los Angeles airport. And they started converting these Mustangs. It was actually a K-code Mustang like I have out on the showroom floor here. They were all white, and he would send them by the truckload or train load to Southern California so that they could be upgraded. What did he upgrade them into? It's called the GT350. And they went from 271 horsepower to about 325 horsepower. They changed some things about the engine, the suspension, but they turned them into race cars, basically. And the cars sold for somewhere around $4,000. Do you know what a GT350 is worth today if it's one of the original cars? Well, one recently brought over $400,000. And in 2026, the Ford Motor Company is going to come back out with the Shelby Mustang. We've had we've had about a 2-year hiatus. And 2026, the GT500 is coming back out, and I'm so excited. This might be a keeper. I don't know. But Ford Motor Company recently started arranging some employment for some very special people at the Dearborn engine plant to start building the engines for these. Carroll Shelby is no longer involved. I'm sure his estate is because they're using his name. But it just shows you a little bit of history about Shelby and what it means. Shelby slapped his name on some Chrysler products. At one time, it didn't take a whole lot for somebody to get Shelby to slap his name on something for a few bucks. But what a career, what a man, and what a car. And the Ford Motor Company is very fortunate to be able to carry on that tradition of the Shelby Mustang. Okay, if you need me for anything, call me or send me a text, 423-552-2020, or send me an email to LennyLawson2020@gmail.com, and I'll see you next time.